Well, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and just get started. We're going to cover a few topics today. The first thing that I wanted to cover was the presentation that I gave to the Government Operations Interim Committee, Legislative Committee last week. So I was asked to present just on how things are going within government operations and what things we're working on as we've been tasked with this, this broad statement to streamline and modernize state government. So I'm going to share that presentation. Let me just grab that real quick. I've gotten much more comfortable with Google Meet, so it takes me a minute with Zoom. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Matt's saying yes. Okay, good. So I'm just gonna make that larger. Okay, still you can see it, Matt. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna go through this presentation that I gave to that legislative committee. The first thing was just a reminder of what SB 181 did, which was it consolidated the departments of Human Resource Management, Administrative Services, and Technology Services into one new department, the Department of Government Operations. And as I talked to the governor's office throughout the end of last year, as we were talking about this consolidation, there were some key goals, and it was taking the agencies that provide services to other state agencies and putting them under one umbrella so that we could break down some silos that existed, that we could create a single ISF resource for the administrative type services that we provide, and that we could provide some greater accountability and collaboration to better meet the needs of other state agencies, especially with avoiding confusion on who's responsible for what. And there are a lot of things that we could do and some great ideas that have come from agencies as we've talked to them, and also employees as we've talked to all of you. And of course, we can't tackle everything at once. This is going to be a multi-year process, but there are 4 things that we identified that we could start piloting internally to address some of the specific issues or concerns or thoughts that were raised in the earlier months of this year as part of our consolidation. And those 4 things that we're working on right now are these internal agency groups, streamlining onboarding, streamlining procurement, and putting together a contract management process in place for state agencies. So the first one was this idea of an internal group. And I know I've talked about this in the last town hall and probably the one before that as well. But as we've been talking to employees, especially now that we're one department, it was always interesting to me to see how often we're engaging with agencies through the lens of our specific division and not necessarily understanding what other divisions within government operations were doing and how they were also interacting with the same state agencies. So we decided to pilot an internal group that would focus on a specific agency, and we would have a representative from each of the divisions within government operations that would come to the table and have those discussions. So we started with the Utah Department of Corrections, and we asked someone from all of the divisions to join that team and to start talking about the Department of Corrections from a holistic perspective. And the goal with that was to improve our customer service, to reduce some of the agency touch points, to break down those silos, and for them to meet and to come up with ideas to address some of the things that agencies were bringing to us. And so this group has been meeting. They are doing a fantastic job. I've joined them twice, and just to get some feedback from them on how things are going. Michael Glenn is chairing that committee, and I asked him to just give me some basic information on how things are going. And this slide comes from him. I also met with the team, I think it was last week, to discuss how things are going. And it was really fun to talk to them and see how this committee is moving forward and some of the ideas that they have. So a couple of the things that I just wanted to pull out that I heard from them is, number one, the first couple of meetings were an opportunity for them to really dive into what the other divisions within government operations do. There was a feeling that there was a high level understanding of what kinds of services we provide, but as they talked to the people who really were responsible for that role, they were gaining a greater insight into what government operations does as a whole as well. And we have this amazing opportunity to improve two-way communication with the agency. And what I mean by that is often with agencies within government operations, they interact with multiple people from government operations, but there seems to be 2 or 3 people that they interact with frequently. And that was usually the IT director, the human resource director, and if they have a lot of contracts, their procurement agent. And those people are engaging with the agencies quite frequently. And so having those individuals part of this overall larger group has allowed our employees, number one, to have more insight into what we're doing as a whole for that agency. So when they're at an executive meeting with the Department of Corrections and they're hearing about things beyond just IT or beyond just human resources, but maybe things that impact finance or fleet or whatever the case is, they have some insight into what we're working on and can share that with the agency. And they're also able to take feedback from those meetings back to this group because now they have contacts within government operations as they're engaging with this team. They're also working together to gather information to help reduce pain points from the agency. So they're very proactively asking the agency what things aren't working so well and how can we help. And there's a little bit of resistance from the agency right now. And we've talked about maybe in future committees being more proactive with the agency. And that's on me to say, we're creating this internal group and here's what we're asking them to accomplish. And so please be very vocal with the things that you would like us to work on and address. But the other thing about this committee is as they're talking through these problems or these issues or these opportunities to provide services to agencies, they've just talked about this, this eliminating the culture of this isn't my job or passing customers along without giving direction. So instead of saying that's a finance issue or that's an IT issue, they now feel more empowered to say, I know who within IT or finance or fleet we can talk to address that need because they're functioning as a team behind the scenes. And so what we've asked this group to do, in addition to focusing on the Department of Corrections, is to come back to the Executive Director's office with recommendations on how we structure future internal teams like this. What things would they recommend that we communicate with the agency? How do we structure it? How often should they meet? What does that look like? And I'm thrilled that this committee has been so proactive in taking this assignment on, and I'm looking forward to what they recommend for future committees. But our goal eventually is to have a similar internal group for all of the agencies that we provide services to, so that we're being very intentional in creating these opportunities for our team within government operations to come together and talk about the agencies we serve on a broader level. Onboarding, and if Steve Cuthbert or Jeff Molotalo is on the line, if I say anything that you want to add to or change, please feel free to speak up. But Jeff and Steve were really instrumental in leading this effort in providing some insight into how our customers and our employees view the process of onboarding and procurement, and helping us strategize and make recommendations on how we could pilot a different process. So first one is onboarding. This is one that we heard about a lot, and I think all of you, when you were onboarded, you can probably understand why that's been a pain point for many agencies. One of the things that we recognize is that there are multiple touch points within government operations for an agency that brings on a new employee, because they have to get access to systems and their hardware, and they need to be set up with payroll, and they need to have all our HR documentation set up, and they need access to buildings, and some agencies, they need vehicles to drive, and there's just all of these different touch points that they have in order to get an employee up and going. And on the left, what it's showing you on the screen is what the agencies want to be able to accomplish with their employees within the first couple of days of an employee starting. And on the right, it's showing the things that they have to work with us in order to have the employee ready to go. And the sooner that we can have these deliverables to the agency, to the employee, the more quickly they're able to transition their employees over to the things that they need to focus on as it relates to developing relationships and spending time with their supervisor and really learning what their job is. Because we haven't been tracking how well we're doing all of those things in the green box, because we weren't one agency, we don't really have a good idea of how often we've really hit that mark. But Human Resources, DHRM, does send out a survey to new employees. I believe it's 2 weeks after they start. Jeff or Steve, you can tell me if I'm wrong. And ask them some general questions on their overall onboarding experience. And while it's not capturing all these things I just talked about, we have a general idea that when it says all conditions are met, we're hitting that about 55% of the time. So room to improve there, understanding that this isn't the most accurate baseline simply because we haven't been collecting everything that we were just talking about in that previous slide. But what our teams have identified is one of the key things that we can do to really help an employee onboard more quickly is to speed up the process. And there are different tours, and I won't get into all the details of that right now, but by starting that process earlier on when an offer is made, instead of waiting until an offer is accepted, it gives us quite a few additional days of lead time to get that employee up and going. So what we want to do is pilot with an agency this newer process. We'll start that earlier with the goal that we're going to have what you see here in red is the full kit for a new employee up and going for these employees when they start on day one. That team's still identifying which agency we're going to pilot that with, and there's a few questions that we still need to address. But again, the goal with that one is to make this a smoother transition, have employees up and going more quickly so they can spend more time with their supervisors, learning their specific job, and also to reduce touch points within government operations. We would like to have a single point of contact. It probably makes sense for it to be the HR analyst or director who can coordinate behind the scenes with the rest of our team on all of these things, but the agency only has to work with that individual. So they're not being passed off from division to division in order to have their employee up and going on that first day. The next one was procurement, and I won't go through all of these, but these are just some of the things that we heard from our customers and internally when it comes to procurement, because we do have separate processes for things that when we're procuring anything related to IT and when we're procuring things that are related to anything else. And it causes some confusion for our customers on who's responsible for what. And sometimes they start down one path only to realize that they need to actually be going down the other path, and then they have to start that process over, which lengthens the time for them to go through the procurement. There's sometimes a lack of communication, or not quite sure who's responsible for things that are when something's already under contract. Anyway, some issues there that we wanted to address. And overall, when we ask ourselves this question of what do we want to accomplish for our customer, the bottom line was we wanted to just have one overall process for solicitations and contracts that is supported by the resources within government operations, but again, reduces touch points for the agency so they don't feel like they don't know who they're supposed to go to or what process they're supposed to go to when they need to procure anything, regardless of what it is. So some of the things that we are going to change or to implement with this pilot. Again, some of the goals are to be more proactive in understanding and helping agencies shape or identify their upcoming procurement needs. So we're aware of expiring contracts, or if there are contracts that already exist and an agency is looking for something, that we can help direct them into someone or a vendor who already has a contract to provide that service. Providing a single point of contact with the agency. In this case, it would be the state purchasing agent for their procurement needs, but that point of contact is going to be engaging behind the scenes with the subject matter experts. So if it was IT related, then they need to be coordinating very closely with the IT director. If it's something else, then they're going to handle that those communications behind the scenes so that the agency is not trying to figure out who they're supposed to be talking to. We're going to encourage additional agency oversight of contract management, which we're going to get to in just a second. And then the pilot program that we're doing this with is, you can see it's actually multiple agencies, and that's because all of these agencies are ones that we identified that have some significant contracts that are coming up. So our procurement team for IT procurements, our procurement team will be working very closely with IT directors and their teams to identify what's working well and what things we can tweak as we go through this pilot. And that really leads into contract management, because procurement deals with contracts. And one of the things that we've heard from agencies and we've heard from the governor's office is that we really struggle as a state overall with contract management. And some of the issues that come up are just, there's not always one person who's assigned to manage the contract. So sometimes there are disagreements on who's responsible. It's really hard to hold vendors accountable when something goes wrong and we're not sure if that's something that the vendor did or something that we didn't follow up on appropriately. And so our goal was ultimately to make sure that we were fulfilling all of the contract obligations that the vendor is required to meet are being fulfilled, that milestones are being achieved, that there's clear direction on who's responsible for what, and that we have some oversight so we can easily identify when there are problems that are occurring and address those before they become bigger problems. I pulled this from an audit that was done in September of 2020. This was related specifically to our emergency procurements, but it really summarizes well a lot of the issues that we're seeing. They talk about how there were instances where a contract was entered into and one state entity would work with the vendor and ask for additional work, reprioritize some of the things without the knowledge of other state agencies who were also part of this contract. There were questions over who was supposed to provide contract oversight to make sure that it was that milestones were being met and that the vendor was delivering. There were instances that one agency might pay the vendor while the contract is managed by another agency, and ultimately the audit determined that there's a lot of confusion and that agencies should communicate on revisions and assign a single entity to oversee and monitor the contract so that we don't run into these issues. So we talked with the governor's office about this. They're very passionate about making sure that we get contract management across the state under control. And there was some discussion about implementing a contract management system. But what we've recommended, and this is coming from the Division of Purchasing, is that we pilot a contract management process. It's being piloted right now with Public Safety and Department of Corrections. And what that looks like is utilizing the resources that exist to get the information that we need to have the oversight of that contract. So this is just an outline of what that looks like right now. A contract manager is assigned from purchasing when a contract is entered into. And then agencies will receive a survey. The first one is just a one-time survey, but it will ask them, who is your contract manager for this contract and what support do you need from purchasing? We do have some smaller agencies who don't have contract managers on staff. And so part of this pilot is going to be identifying somebody within the Division of Purchasing that can help with that. But after we've identified who the contract manager is, then a survey goes out every 30 days that's asking them some questions related to the contract. So have you had interactions with the vendor? Are they meeting those milestones? Is the contract on schedule and on budget? Do you need any changes? And overall, what's your view on this vendor? How well are they performing? This is a screenshot of some of that data that's being gathered. And as we're going through this pilot and gathering more of that data through those surveys, then this dashboard will expand to include more information. But what we want to be able to give agencies is just a better insight into what contracts they have, how well they're performing, contracts that are expiring, and again, being able to quickly visualize and identify if there are problems that need to be addressed throughout this process. The benefits of this process is, again, that we'll just have a better oversight over the contract. We can address issues more quickly. The governor's office will have real-time insight into these contract issues as well, so they don't feel surprised if something comes up that they're not aware of. Another benefit is if we take this approach, agencies who need resources from government operations, we will be able to assign a contract manager to them if they don't have a contract manager of their own or a way to oversee that process. And one of the things we discussed with the governor's office and the legislature is that this new process wouldn't require an appropriation or an increase in rates. And the reason why is with our vendors who are on the state cooperative contract list, we assess, and Chris Hughes, I know you're on the line, feel free to chime in if I am just slaughtering this, but we assess a vendor fee to those contracts, and we can utilize the funding that comes in through those for these types of things. It's everything related to procurement, so we can fund it, an additional contract management team if we need, or help that our agencies need. And a question that comes up sometimes is, well, don't vendors dislike paying this fee? And the answer is no, because it's easier for them as well. When we put a vendor on the state cooperative contract, we have state agencies who then utilize those vendors. We have local governments, so cities and counties and education. they utilize those contracts. And instead of the vendor having to set up a contract with all of those entities separately and hire their staff to manage all those contracts and to negotiate those contracts and oversee those contracts, they have one point of contact with the state who they're engaged with for that contract management process. And so they actually appreciate having that centralized approach, and that fee, like I said, can cover the costs that are associated with that. So those are the 4 big things that we're working on now. Let me stop sharing my screen so I can see you all again. Those are the 4 things that we're piloting now. We're really going to focus on pilots before just making changes, because we want to make sure that we're on the right track and that we can modify things as we need to before we just implement it across the state. So these things are all in pilot phase right now. Our goal is to have some additional deliverables and information that we can share with the legislature next legislative session, as they'll be asking, you've done this consolidation, how are you streamlining things? What's better? What's working? And so we're working on those quite a bit. I'm just looking real quick at questions because I wasn't able to see. Do we do background checks? I believe that is public safety. Is that BCI? Is that public safety, Marilee? Do you know?
The ERIC, it depends. The ERIC also does background checks.
Okay.
So some agencies do their own. Sometimes we go through ERIC, sometimes we go through public safety, depending also on the type of background check we need to do.
Okay. And thank you, Marilee, for being dressed up. Look at you. Hello, the insurance lady.
So my real question on that was specifically, it's been, when we talked about onboarding processes, background checks have bitten us more than a few times. So
okay.
I just wanted to make sure it was on the radar because I didn't see it on any slide.
Okay, that is good to know. I'm gonna write that one down just to talk to the team about that. And I think, and I could be wrong on this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it depends on the position because not every employee receives a background check. Okay, we'll follow up on that one. Thank you. Okay, so somebody answered that. For contract management, is that after the contract has been executed? So yes, the management, the contract, once an agency has entered into the contract, then that the management part, that's when that kicks in, where we want to make sure that now that we have a contract in place, we want to make sure that the vendor is fulfilling all of the obligations and that we're meeting all of our obligations too, so that the contract is on target, on budget, and that it's accomplishing what it's intended to do. Oh, Michael already answered that. Sorry, I should look through these before I start answering. Okay, those are all the questions that I see for now. Before I move on to the next subject, are there any other questions related to that update that I provided? Oh, thank you, Steve. I'm glad I didn't butcher that. Like I said, Steve and Jeff really led this effort, but they pulled in people from the various divisions that work on onboarding or work on procurement to get their insights and to make sure that we were on the right track. So I really appreciate their work and everyone that participated with this process. Jenny, do you have access to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marilee.
I would feel honored if you would tell the story to everybody of what your presentation was like.
Oh, Marilee. See, this is why I shouldn't tell things to Marilee. So I guess this is probably payback because I've done this a few times to other people, but very, very short story. I was on the agenda. I was number 9 on the agenda with this legislative committee, and they had a bunch of election stuff to talk about before me. So I figured I was going to be waiting for at least an hour, if not longer, before they got to me. So I arrived on time and I briefly spoke to a few people, and then I sat in the back so I could plug my laptop in and go over my presentation. I don't love presenting. It's not my favorite thing. So I wanted to go over it one more time and just make sure I felt comfortable with things. And I sat down for maybe 20 or 30 seconds before Senator Thatcher, who's the chair of the committee, was frantically waving at me to come forward. And I kind of mouthed me and he said yes. And so I took my laptop up to the front and he announced that they didn't have a quorum. And so they were going to move on to parts of the agenda that were later that didn't require a quorum. And they were going to start with me and I was going to present first. I was not prepared to be number 1 on the agenda. So I was feeling a little flustered as I was trying to get my laptop loaded so I could show my presentation and to start talking. So they weren't just sitting there waiting for me to start my presentation. And I was typing in my password and it wasn't working. And it was as I hit enter on the third attempt that I realized I was typing in the password for my personal computer, not my work computer. And at that point, it locked me out of my laptop and I could not get into my laptop. So then I was feeling really flustered, but fortunately I had sent my presentation to the LFA and just casually asked her, please say, would you mind pulling up my presentation on the screen? And she did so, and Marilee and others assured me that nobody could tell that I was feeling as flustered as I was. So there you go. That's my story. On access to the slides, I'm happy to, I'll just put it into a PDF and send it out. Let me write that down so I don't forget. Someone says, any pilot projects for DTS programmers and services? From a department-wide perspective, we're just focused on those 4 right now. One of the things I really wanted to be cautious with was not throwing so many pilot projects out that it became overwhelming, and people who are trying to do their regular day job also are focused on all of these pilots. So from a government operations perspective, those are the 4 that we're working on now. But there may be ones, we always encourage divisions specifically to identify better ways of doing things within their divisions. And I know some of the divisions are looking at pilot projects. I won't name all of those, but I mean, Fleet I know is looking at a pilot project. I think purchasing is looking at another pilot. There are things that are happening within the divisions that are outside of just the overall scope of things. And so there could be things within DTS that they're piloting as well. I don't know if Alan's on the call, if he wants to talk about that at all. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody, so I'm not sure if he's here or not. Anyway, so these are the 4 that we're focused on as the department for now. But as we wrap these ones up, we're going to continually be looking at ways that we can, especially as it crosses divisions, how we can do things more efficiently for our customers. And so there will be more pilots that are coming up. And again, we encourage within divisions to constantly be doing that same process as well. Okay, I don't see any other questions related to that update. So I'm going to move on to the next subject, but feel free to throw questions in there if they come up. Dan Chase, are you on the line?
Yep.
Okay, hi Dan. So we've had a few questions that have come up over the last few weeks as it relates to this, speaking of pilots, performance management pilot that we're doing within government operations with the goal that it will eventually be rolled out to all state agencies. And so Dan, I just wanted to turn some time over to you to maybe give an update on that and to provide some additional insight and allow people to ask questions on that.
Okay, let me just share with you. You'll be getting, this is you as in everybody will be getting an email today about this, including access to the webinar and the job aid. As a reminder, we wanted to do that because we're coming to the end of the first month of piloting this. Just by way of reminder, the changes to performance management are really just a few things. One is that we're trying to formalize at a minimum monthly conversations between supervisors and employees. And the distinction now, of course, for a lot of you, that of course that's happening. We would expect that would happen, but now there's actually a verification. So employees should be getting a AAA where they verify that this conversation has been taking place. And that should be sent to you weekly until you verify. Now, let me tell you one little change that's happened. We're having at best some inconsistency with whether or not managers, the original intention was that supervisors or managers, once employees verify that the conversation had taken place, would then second that verification. They would get a AAA and they would verify, yeah, this has taken place. We're working with DTS right now because managers don't seem to be getting an email with that AAA. Now, that doesn't change any of the paradigm or the strategy related to this. It just means now that if we're looking at compliance and if I'm a supervisor and I want to know if my employees are acknowledging this, I probably have to go in and look at their profile and see if they acknowledged it or not. But we're currently working on that. We're not sure if we misunderstood the functionality or if there's a technical glitch right now. But again, if I'm a supervisor or an employee right now, that shouldn't really change anything, especially as it relates to the strategy behind all this. The other things, of course, are every active performance plan has been has a behavioral goal, simply saying you'll be behave in compliance with the SEAT behavioral framework, the SEAT competencies. That's automatically populated. The other one that seems to be giving people heartburn, or there seems to be a little misunderstanding, is these two developmental goals. One project or task-based and one behaviorally based from the SEAT competency framework. I need to make something very clear, and that is that these new goals, the two developmental goals, the behavioral goal, they in no way, shape, or form replace the everyday tasks or objectives that exist and that are attached to a job description or a position as it currently stands. So it doesn't supplant what was in, maybe if you're taking last year's performance plan and putting it in this year's, it doesn't supplant all those things. It's in addition to, and we want to make sure that that's very clear, right? The whole reason for this, of course, is we are trying to formalize those behaviors which so many of you really effective managers are already doing. Right. And we realize if I'm a manager and I'm already doing, of course, I'm having at a minimum monthly conversations with my employees, recognize that, believe it or not, what we discovered is that there are some supervisors among us that aren't having these conversations. And we're trying to formalize, incentivize those behaviors. And of course, developmental goals, development is always useful. Growth and stretch are always valuable, but in particular, you have to know, if this is going to make sense, you have to know that this is part of a larger plan relating to legislation and other performance management strategies coming in year 2, year 3. Right. And we talked about that in the webinar. And of course, you'll have access to that webinar again here. So we get it. This is new. This is strange, but we're really just trying to add a few things to the already really effective performance management that's happening in our divisions. We're trying to take something good and make it even better with just a few minor tweaks that change is hard, but we know ultimately will sort of become ingrained. And of course, the last thing is to further integrate and initiate the SEAT values into everything that we do. And that's why we want them included in every performance plan, as a reminder that these are not the only values of GovOps, but they're certainly key values that we want to use as a foundation for the culture here. So that's a lot of talking. And Jenny mentioned questions. I'm happy to answer questions here now, or if you have questions, as we mentioned to you supervisors, the 200 plus of you that attended, if you have questions, please reach out to the leadership and organizational development team in DHRN. That's what we're there for. We're happy to assist and answer any questions you might have. So any questions right now?
I'm not seeing any, Dan, but I'll let you know if anything comes up.
Okay. That again, you'll be getting an email today with this content that I just mentioned, as well as for your assistance, the job aid, the webinar, and access to the SEAT competency framework, which is almost verbatim and taken just from the SEAT values framework, which of course leadership has done a great job of sharing with us and promoting. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to take the win and mute.
So Dan, I just want to mention, so we are at about the first month mark of launching this new paradigm of performance management. And so all of you should be touching base with your supervisors in line with kind of more frequent conversations with your supervisor. Dan, do you have anything that you want to say about that?
No, except that I think that's well said, Marilee. What we're looking for, of course, is that performance management is all of our responsibility, right? We want to get everybody, we're trying to increase productive dialogue. It is absolutely foundational and essential to effective management and organizational success. And so that's why we have you employees that are listening with non-supervisory responsibilities. The obligation rests with you first. And if we don't get that functionality in UPM, solely rests with you to say, yes, I've had a performance conversation with my supervisor. We're trying to have those coaching conversations. The last thing I'll say, Marilee, and I don't want to get too long-winded with this, I apologize, but those developmental goals, you guys don't freak out about those, okay? These are developmental goals are different than other types of accountability goals, right? They are stretch and growth opportunities. These are, believe it or not, these are ultimately, you almost want to see them as a reward for an employee and say, hey, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to get better at? And me as a manager, I'm going to help you. I'm going to coach you through that. I'm going to help you do that. So partly what you'll be seeing in the future is more training opportunities for you managers, is what our team will be working on to help you become even more effective at this and help you with that coaching process. So, well, there's actually a question. Kathleen, do these coaching conversations have to be formal, or can it be frequent chats with tips on improving processes? Oh, sure. Look, the second I have a 30-second conversation with an employee, believe it or not, I have fulfilled the requirement in terms of being compliant for this. An employee can truthfully and with integrity say, yeah, we've had a performance conversation. Now, the principle behind it, of course, is that these conversations are happening as formally or informally, as frequently or infrequently as needed. Right? For employees, as a manager or supervisor, my job is to help you, employee, be successful. How can I best do that? Right? And that's really, so whether how frequent, right, how informal or formal, that still hasn't been prescribed yet. Just as long as at a minimum, that conversation is happening, I should say, at a minimum monthly. I suspect it's happening way more than that for most of us. Right? So does that answer your question, Kathleen?
And one of the things I want to point out, Dan, is as we were talking about this performance management process, and I say we, really Dan and his team looking at this, we were, a lot of the decisions that were made were based on feedback that we received from employees. So as we did surveys, and I shared this in a town hall, I've lost track of which town hall now, but we had one talking about the results of the survey that we did within government operations. And one of the areas where we received low marks from employees was they didn't feel like they knew what was wanted of them to be successful. They didn't feel like they had, they were receiving feedback from their supervisors, either in a manner or frequency or whatever the case is, for them to feel confident that they knew what was expected of them. And so part of this performance management process is to address that concern that was raised quite frequently in the survey that we did.
Thank you. That is 2 points, right? That you have had, this is in response to feedback. This is not just, hey, what if we make people's lives more difficult, right? It was feedback that you gave us. And also these are clarity conversations. These are opportunities to say, look, if you really want to be successful, here's how it is. I'm going to give you feedback, right? And if you want to stretch
12 inches deep by 84. There we go.
Oh, sorry, whoever's last name is Pitkin, if you can just mute your microphone.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
I didn't get all the measurements on that though. So if you want to, anyway. Yeah. So anyway, these are clarity conversations in response to what the many opportunities we've had to give feedback and everything. So make it understand that there are minimum compliance things, but really we're trying to foster the right principles, the right behaviors, the right culture of performance management. And sometimes we have to do that with formal processes first until it becomes ingrained into what we are as a culture. So.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, moving on real quick to the next topic. And actually, before I do that, Michael, Glenn, I saw that you're on the line. Is there anything that I missed when it came to the UDC pilot group that you would like to add or share, or make sure that we covered? And I'm totally putting him on the spot, so no worries if not. Okay, we'll move on then. For those of you who did not see the email that I sent out last night, it was late, so you may not have gotten to it yet, but just a change that I wanted to make people aware of. Deputy Director Ken Hansen, who I think is on the line, has worked for the state, I want to say 41 and a half years. I said 41 years, and I think he corrected me. That was 41 and a half years. And he will be retiring effective January. So we are thrilled that he's going to be able to spend more time with his family and enjoy a well-deserved retirement. Also, we will miss him greatly. Ken has been such a tremendous resource to the state of Utah, to our department. He's been a fantastic mentor for me as I've taken on this job and had a lot to learn. And again, just this combination of so happy for him and so sad that he's not going to be here to help continue to guide and direct us as we move forward with the Department of Government Operations. So, oh, is John Barron giving a grumpy face? I wish I could see everybody. Oh, and Ken, are you in costume now too?
I am wearing my jester hat. I couldn't let you be the only one dressed up. But Jenny, this is as dressed up as I get.
That's okay. It's perfect. So this is not saying goodbye because we fortunately get to keep Ken for another 2 months, and I'm going to say longer because he is hopefully under no pretense that we're not going to be calling him all the time after January as we have questions. But again, well deserved, and he will be missed. And as part of that, I have asked Chris Hughes to become the next deputy director. So he will start training with Ken over the next couple of months, and we will be opening up the division director role for the Division of Purchasing and General Services. Ken, anything you want to say?
Just thank you. I have absolutely loved all of the jobs that I've had with the state, but especially the last 7 years in the executive director's office, first with DAS and now with GovOps. In my role, I have relied on others to be successful. I've been responsible for coordinating either with our customer agencies or with the legislature or the governor's office on budget issues. And I've had to rely on a lot of other people to do my job. And I am so grateful for the opportunity that I've had to work with everyone. Thank you for all you do and continue to do to keep us going in the right direction.
Ken, someone's asking if you're going to become a volunteer with Archives, which is where you started. So I think that's a great idea. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left. Any just general questions that we can answer? Okay, someone says, with the construction going on with the parking lot at TSOB, are there plans for the entrance to the parking lot? It's very steep, and I'm finding that I have to cut into the turn and slow way down to be able to get in without bottoming out. Yeah, I have the same, that road, that entrance is tough, but I'm not sure if that's DFCM or the city. Is Jim on the line or someone from DFCM that can answer that question? Marilee, you know everything.
I would be happy to make up an answer here, but I actually have no idea. I will say that I have experienced now 3 flat tires, so I feel your pain.
So Melissa, if you'll just grab that question, we will follow up with DFCM and get back to you on that one. Oh, someone said, can you confirm from your email the additional leave for holidays? Yes. So, and this is me being new this year to this as well. So Cass, if you're on the line and need to clarify anything I'm saying, feel free to do so. But the governor's office traditionally, and this year is going to continue, has granted 4 hours of administrative leave for eligible employees to be used during the holiday season, which I think that is November 26th through December 31st. I think those are the dates. They're in the email. So they've granted that 4 hours for eligible employees. And then we as a department are going to match it with 4 hours so that eligible employees will have that full 8 hours. It is prorated for part-time employees, and I don't remember the exact formula for that. That would be a great question for Cass, but it really is a way to express our thanks and appreciation for all that you do for our department and for other state agencies. And so if you have questions on if you're eligible or how to utilize it, please talk to your supervisor or reach out to Cass, who is with DHRM and is the HR director for government operations. And always just make sure that you're scheduling time off with your supervisor, because we still have to make sure that we have appropriate coverage during business hours.
Jenny, can I make a comment here?
You may.
I'll be sending out an email probably the first of next week, but it's probably a good time to just bring this up. So we will be paying out excess leave as well. I think it's the second pay date in November that we would be paying that out. If you have excess leave, that will be paid out automatically unless you let us know that you don't want it paid. And that's an option too. If you don't want it paid out and want to hold on to it, just let us know. I'll give you instructions for how to do that in the email, but I just wanted to let you know that that was coming up too.
Thank you.
And let me clarify excess leave, because I get this question a lot. Excess leave is the leave that you earn during the week of a holiday. So it's not comp time. It's not annual leave. It's a very specific type of leave. And the reason that we can pay that out is because it's already hit the budgets. It hits the budgets as soon as it's accrued. So that's why it's this specific type of leave, because it's just simply easier for us to do.
Marilee, it's leave that you earn during the week of a holiday if you work overtime, right?
Correct.
Okay. And Sherry had a question for you. Will that be paid out annually now?
Our intention would be to pay that out. So about this time every year.
I see a comment about Chris's daughter. We have someone joining us, it looks like, for our town hall today. She is adorable. What's her name, Chris?
Her name is Ellie,
Hi,
and we're
Ellie.
currently investigating some issues between her brother and her. So that's why she's here.
She's welcome anytime. Any other questions that we can answer? She does have beautiful red hair.
Jenny, can I just say something else while we're waiting for another question? I just want to thank you all so much for participating in these surveys. I can't begin to tell you how much it's helping us. We have started focus groups. The last survey that went out, we got an awful lot of comments about supervisors, both good and bad. A lot of you just love your supervisors. There's others that feel like there's a lot of micromanaging going on, or that your supervisor doesn't know what you do, or so we held 6 focus groups that the intention behind those was to try to understand more what you feel like a good supervisor looks like, and where some of our critical issues are in a little bit more depth than what we got from the surveys. We got some great feedback about that. I had a great conversation yesterday with Dan Chase, and we talked about some of these things. I want you to know that I asked Dan if he would do some personal leadership coaching with me. One of our seat values is accountability, and I personally am accountable as a leader, and I just want to harness every resource to help me in that role. So I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to get started with him and want to specifically talk with him about some of these things that have come out in the surveys. But I want you to know these surveys, we pore over them. this information is so incredibly helpful, and the turnout on these surveys has been phenomenal. And I just can't thank you enough for taking that time and giving us your feedback. And I know that there's a lot of them, and just please continue with that. So
Thanks, Marilee.
I
Matt's
just
warning you that Dan isn't a good influence, so he's cautioning you.
Can we establish that Matt and I know each other? And he's being sarcastic. I hope. Let's get that on the record there.
I can see Matt laughing. So,
well, I
Thank
feel
you,
like
Matt.
just know if I get any better, you'll know that Dan's a genius. If I just tank and all of you hate me, then that's Dan's fault.
Oh
I
man.
want to add something that Marilee said. I agree. I so appreciate all of the feedback that we're getting. We do take it seriously. We are working to implement it. Like I mentioned with performance management, some of that was based off of the feedback that we got from these surveys and these focus groups, that employees really felt like they needed some additional guidance and feedback from supervisors. One of the things that I need to do better, and that I've challenged our senior leadership to do better as well, is in addition to gathering this feedback and implementing it, taking it back and sharing the whys, why we're making changes or why we're doing the things that we do. And one of the reasons why I decided to present to you today that what I presented to the Government Operations Interim Committee is for that. We're piloting these things, and I wanted to share with you why we chose these things and why these matter to our agencies. And so I hope that providing that information was helpful in sharing not just a change is coming, but here's how we got to this point. Here's why we're doing this thing. And so that's something I need to improve upon. And we're going to, as a leadership team, we want to do better on as well. It's not just getting in feedback and implementing it, but then reporting back to all of you the whys on our decisions or the things that are being changed or modified or updated or implemented. Someone said, with implementation of supervisor-manager conversation, what tools or resources are being developed for those supervisors, managers to utilize? Employees that would like additional training on other divisions for possible development, what do they have to offer when they receive interest? I'm gonna address this quickly, and then John Barron, if you want to provide some additional context in here as well. There are a couple of things that I would say. First of all, specific tools that we're looking for. Number one is we have asked through the budget request process for funding to implement a human capital management system, which would replace UPM, and it would have the technology tools that we feel are necessary to really make this effective and easy for supervisors and managers and for employees to be able to do this. In addition to that, one of the things that we recognize is that it's one thing to promote someone to a supervisor role, and it's another to train them to know how to be an effective supervisor, know what we're expecting, know how to do performance evaluations and all of the things that supervisors and managers are expected to do. And so John Barron's team, DHRM, they are working on developing that now on creating trainings and such that provide support for supervisors and managers on specifically management training. Something that we're talking about as well, we don't have a process in place yet, but you talk about additional training on other divisions. We hear that a lot. We're hearing from a lot of employees who say they're interested in learning what opportunities exist even laterally across other divisions, and can we provide cross-training opportunities or job shadowing opportunities, and that's come up frequently. And so that is something we're talking about, and we're very interested in doing. We don't have it all mapped out yet, but it is on the radar. John Barron, do you want to add to that?
I just say, Jen, the person who made the comments name is Jen. I appreciate this. I will make sure Jenny, Director Reese, gets some credit here. I think I've said this in this forum before. Probably about 2 months in, Jenny sent me a note asking for this type of development. Of course, as we work with our managers, sometimes aligning our priorities, and we decided that there were some other things in the works that probably would help us lead to this, what I'd call a internal rotational program that can develop DGO talent, right? We have a framework. I'd say that introducing the returnship program was helpful for us. I'd say that introducing performance management has shown us new muscles. So this is, while I want to say high on the priority list, you may not feel an implementation of an internal DGO learning and development program. Maybe in the next 3 or 4 months, I know that it's starting to creep up as we've been able to check off a few things. And this is something that often your leaders, the Alan Fullers and the Marilees and Kens and Director Reese ask for. I just quite honestly haven't been able to open up that box to Jenny's point. So then we're getting close. But what I do know is that if you want that opportunity, it is coming. And again, this is probably about the 12th different way we've been asked for it. So stay a little patient with us as we roll out just a few more things. I think we've got our sights set on this. And honestly, even the governor has talked about it. So it permeates the full organization and something we owe. But I'm hesitant to put a timeline on it at this point. But it's coming, I assure you.
Thank you, John. It is noon, so we're at the end of time. If you have any other questions that you didn't have an opportunity to ask, feel free to send them via email. We're happy to engage that way as well. I'm hoping a lot of you will be here at Seesaw today with your families for trick-or-treating. It's 3 to 5. Yeah, Marilee's nodding yes. Okay, 3 to 5. So many of us will be here handing out candy. We'd love to see you. As always, we appreciate your participation in this and your willingness to ask questions and engage with us as we continue to move forward with government operations. So thank you for your time. We'll talk soon.